Hello, fellow paranormal enthusiasts. I am your host, Crystal Diff, Program Coordinator with History Services for this month's Fringe Paranormal episode. This month, I'm going to be talking to you about one of the most popular hauntings in Charlotte County, and it takes place in Punta Gorda at the Sandlin home. Now, I do want to reiterate that this program is for adults, and some of the content may be disturbing for some viewers. I'm going to give you a little bit of background information before we go into the actual haunting, just to get into some of the tragedies that took place within the Sandlin family and why this home is said to be haunted. James Sandlin moved to Punta Gorda in 1884. At that time, it was known as the town of Tribune for a few years. He started off just doing odd jobs. He moved here with the Morgan family, so he helped them out with citrus farming, and he ended up working himself into the real estate business. He amassed a lot of land in the area, was doing very well, and his success boomed with the growth of Punta Gorda. Around 1886, he was able to donate some land for the cemetery in town, known as Indian Springs Cemetery. James Sandlin went on to continue his success. He was on the first city council, he became mayor, he was on the Punta Gorda Pilot Commission, and did very well for himself. In 1888, Mary Lula Seward caught his eye, and they fell in love and got married at the first officiated wedding in Punta Gorda. But this is where the story starts to get grim. The very next year, Mary Lula gave birth to their first son. Unfortunately, he only lived for about 3 days and was buried in Indian Springs Cemetery. He was only the third burial in the cemetery, and I'm sure that the Sandlins were not aware that they would end up being the first to use the cemetery that James had donated the land for. Despite the tragedy, the family continued to move forward. They were able to move into a newly built home in 1893. They built this beautiful Queen Anne style home on the corner of Henry Street and West Retta Esplanade in Punta Gorda, near where Gilchrist Park is today. And the house still stands and is one of our treasured historic homes in the community. But tragedy continued to follow this family despite their successes. In 1902, their 11-year-old son Felix passed away from tuberculosis. The following year, James Sandlin himself succumbed to tuberculosis, leaving his wife Mary Lula a widow with 4 children. Their 4 children were James Heyman, Mary Leah, Bessie Lee, and Reed Ware. At this point, there were 3 deaths in the family, and 2 of them occurred within their home. Now, it was customary at the time for children to help out with household duties, just like we have our children help out with chores today. So one of the eldest daughters, Mary Leah, was out on the day of August 3rd, 1909. She was on the front porch ironing some clothes. So she was out there, she had set up the ironing board, and at that time, people did not have electric irons. Electricity just wasn't widespread enough at this point in time. So people were using liquid fuel powered irons, similar to this one here. Now they would have a fuel tank that they would fill with oil or gasoline or even kerosene. And then you would light the tank so that the iron would give off continuous heat. This helped so that you didn't have to bring the iron back and forth to another heat source like a stove or fire. So this really was one of the common household items of the time. Now, Mary Leah was out there. She had everything set up. She had just filled the fuel tank and she lit a match when tragedy struck. I'm going to read the account from the newspaper. This is from the Ocala Evening Star on the 5th of August, 1909. It's titled, "Sad Fate of Miss Sandlin. Pretty Punta Gorda girl burned to death by an explosion of gasoline." Punta Gorda, August 5th. Miss Mary Sandlin, a beautiful girl of 15 years of age, died here yesterday afternoon as a result of burns. Miss Sandlin was attempting to operate a patent gasoline iron. Some of the fluid spilled on the piece of cloth she was attempting to iron and over the ironing board. The fumes generated were of sufficient density to cause an explosion when she struck a match, and in a moment her entire body was enveloped in flames. She ran screaming from the house, and the efforts of those near her quickly extinguished the flames. This was not, however, until she had been so badly burned that she died 6 hours later. Miss Sandlin was one of the prettiest and most lovable young girls in Punta Gorda, and the town was cast in gloom when the sad tidings were announced. Now, this article says she was 15, but she was about 1 month away from her 15th birthday. Now, this article was passed through Tampa, Ocala, and made a lot of headlines at the time. And again, neighbors were trying to help extinguish the flames as fast as possible as she went running down the street screaming for help. At this time, there was no hospital in Punta Gorda. The closest hospital was in Arcadia. So they took her back into her home, and they tried to treat her wounds as best as they possibly could with everything that they had available to them at the time. But they just didn't think that in her fragile state that she would make it to Arcadia. There weren't many automobiles in the area at this time either. She fought for her life in that home for an agonizing 6 hours until she succumbed to her wounds. Now, this horrendous incident is said to have kept her spirit locked into this home. People who have lived in the home over time have encountered paranormal activity in the home, and most of the accounts are similar over time. A lot of people say that they hear footsteps going towards where Mary Leah's room used to be and up towards the widow's walk. Closet doors open and owners struggle to shut them. They say that it's almost like a tug of war with the door. Baskets of laundry are known to be tossed around. Dolls have gotten played with. There's also accounts of marbles. When kids used to play marbles, and that was a popular game at the time, they would leave the marbles out, and then the game was said to correctly play itself. Also, some say that the deeply scorched porch at the area where Mary was ironing her clothes at the time, that there's nothing that can cover up the scorched area of the porch. She turns irons on, and also over time, parents who have children have said that their children's friends refuse to sleep over at the home because of all the banging and noises and moving around at night. Laura Hollander is one of those residents, and she grew up in the home and was haunted by the spirit as a young girl. She would feel like someone was sitting at the end of the bed. She would feel the weight of somebody sitting there, but nobody was actually there that she could see. She would feel like somebody was watching her. Laundry would be thrown from the dryer onto the floor, making them wrinkled. And then it would force her to have to iron those clothes because of how wrinkled they were. And it said that the iron would already be turned on. Objects would be rattled outside of her bedroom door. And once Laura turned 14, she said that all of the hauntings towards her stopped. The Wynn family, which lived there around 2014, actually found an old gas-powered iron on the property, and they cleaned it up and actually put it on display in their home. So maybe there's even some connection between the iron being in the home and the spirit of Mary Leah being in the home. They also added a new addition onto the property that was hurricane safe. And they said when they're in that part of their property that there are no hauntings in the newer construction, but all of the hauntings are said to happen just in the historic part of their home. But regardless of this spirit sometimes being known as Scary Mary, most of these sightings are pretty harmless and the owners don't feel threatened by her. The scariest thing is that she does turn the iron on, so people are a little afraid that there might have another accident with the iron. But a lot of the owners who have children and who are parents say that she acts like a normal teenager would. Even Laura Hollander said that it almost felt like she just wanted somebody her age to play with. So most people are not very threatened by her spirit. But the story continues to be one of the most popular ghost stories in our area. There have been countless news reports. There have been tours with this story as one of the focus. There's been books where this story has been published. And it has even gotten across into the UK, where a newspaper article was put out in the Daily Mail about the haunting of the Sandlin home. So it's one of the most infamous ghost stories that we have here, one of the most widespread. For more information on the haunting of the Sandlin home and to join the discussion, maybe you've had an encounter with some of the hauntings that are said to have occurred in the Sandlin home, you can go to our discussion board on padlet.com/history services/Fringe Paranormal, so that you can see some of the newspaper articles there as well regarding Mary Leah Sandlin. Thank you all for joining me today on another paranormal slice of history in Charlotte County. Join me next month as I gather up another story for you.